most open-ended projects from the house reno series is this, the fireplace. I've been working on it all year long, and I have the goal of getting it done by Christmas, which is pretty soon. Obviously, it looks a lot different than last time you saw it, and there's a lot of work that's been done, which I'm gonna go over. The main thing that's left to do is the mantle, and I wanted something really special for the center of our home, and I got this amazing opportunity to go to Urban Hardwoods. Urban Hardwoods is a local furniture company that salvages city trees, they kiln dry them, and they store them, and then they build all these beautiful tables with that material. Now, they opened up their facilities for the first time ever to the public, and I was able to go and pick up a couple slabs. The cool thing about this is that I get to work with trees that I never have before, and they had a couple slabs of Madrona. Madrona is my favorite tree. It's endemic to here, and it's iconic because of the way that it stretches out over the Puget Sound. It has this beautiful reddish bark that peels seasonally. I love it so much that I planted one in our front yard, and I get to look at it every single day. But I've never had a chance to work with the wood. So I'm really excited about this mantle. I also have some crazy ideas for some 3D printed hidden hardware that I can't wait to try out. But before we get into building the mantle, let's review what's happened to the fireplace since you guys last saw it. If you remember all the way back, it was a pretty sad little fireplace with a lot of structural damage. It was actually pushing out the wall. So we decided to remove the whole facade while the walls were open. And when we discovered fire damage in that wall, we decided to hire an actual mason to do the rest of the job. I've always felt like that fireplace was a little bit puny for the space, so I asked the mason to build something a little bit more substantial, and he did a great job. He built it out of scrap brick and didn't tuck point it because our plan was to cover it up. Little did I know at the time that we would live with it like this for about a year. We decorated for the holidays, it looked fine, but it was bugging me the whole time that it was unfinished. And the reason for that is that we couldn't make a design decision. We thought we wanted tile, but all the tile samples just didn't look right. We wanted something simple, modern, and clean, but something that also looked handmade. I mentioned that to my buddy Kamani, and he said, maybe you should try plaster. For the same reason I don't do my own drywall, I don't do my own plaster work, and it was hard to find a plaster contractor, period. We called every single one of them. A lot of them ghosted us. Some of them were way outside of our price range, but we were lucky to find both Efren and Leonardo. Efren did the prep work, and Leonardo did the finish work. I love watching specialists do what they do best because I know this is incredibly hard, and Leonardo makes it look so easy. I appreciate him and Efren taking the time to make our vision come to life. I was walking past my neighbor's house and I found this giant piece of Doug fir. It's meant to be because this is like a perfect test for the mantle. It's the exact size that I need. Since I stumbled onto this free lumber and the live edge slabs are so precious, I wanted to make sure that I got the dimensions just right. And this isn't gonna be your typical mantle. I have an idea for some hidden hardware that is gonna make this mantle multifunctional. More on that in a minute, but first I had to mill down this lumber. It looked surprisingly good for a 2x12. Once it was thicknessed, I could trim off an edge and then cut it to width. I'm kind of surprised how much I like that right off the bat. It looks pretty good. One thing I'm noticing is that it is not sitting flat on those bricks. I don't know if I fix it with trim or something like that, but I sort of like the clean look of it right now. Nice to see this, and then when I make the actual mantle, I can take these notes. This might change the design a little bit. The test mantle proved itself useful straight out of the gate. I trimmed it to the width that I thought that it needed to be, as well as the length, and I added a rounded corner, which did not go very smoothly with the jigsaw.
Gotta hate jigsaws.
The jigsaw was tearing out the grain. It looked awful. I was able to clean it up with a rasp, but when I go to build the mantle for real, I'm gonna have to figure something else out. So I had this idea in the middle of the night. You know how over the holidays you hang things from the mantle like stockings and Christmas lights? My dad used to install these little brass hooks that you buy at the hardware store They work, but they're kind of cheesy looking, and you have to decide whether you want to leave them up all year or if you want to remove them. And if you install them over and over again, eventually the threads will start to deteriorate. So I had this thought. We use T-track in the wood shop all the time. Now, I'm not gonna put a bright blue T-track into my mantle, but I was going through my router bits and I found this, which is a keyhole bit. This is designed to make that keyhole slot in the back of picture frames when you want to hang it on the wall. What if I take the keyhole bit and I run a slot along the entire length of the mantle, plunging in at one side, pulling it out at the other side? I'll end up with a little circle on either end and a long, basically, T-track that I can design whatever hooks or hoops or whatever I want to hold whatever we need depending on the season to decorate our mantle. I've never seen anybody do anything quite like this, and I've never used one of these bits. So let's test it out on the test mantle and see how it works before I go and do it to the real mantle. This is a bit of a tough router maneuver, mostly because there's not a lot of surface area and I need this to be perfectly straight all the way along. The final mantle is going to be live edge, so that also presents a problem. I can't reference off that edge, which means using a track saw track with my router. This is also a one-cut operation, so I can't pull the bit out while I'm working on it, otherwise the track wouldn't be clean. I managed to get it to the other side, but I had some issues with my work holding and it didn't come out perfect. That said, it still came out pretty darn good and I'm really happy with it. The issue that I had was that it slid a little bit over that long length and I was off my mark by about a 1/4 inch.
Just a little bit off.
I'll have to figure out how to hold it a little better next time, but as a proof of concept, it worked great. Now I need to design some hardware to make this track work, and the thing that's gonna make that possible just showed up at my front door. There's just one problem. I can't lift this thing by myself.
2 people or more. Okay. Maybe you go here. 1, 2, 3. That's it. Just go straight up on the. Perfect.
Hi.
This is awesome. I'm so excited about this. I'm gonna nerd out for a minute. This is the Bambu Lab H2D, and I have been drooling over these machines ever since they were introduced, and Bambu Lab did send this out to me, full disclosure. Thank you, Bambu Lab. That's incredible. I have been wanting a 3D printer in the shop. I used to have one and I got really frustrated with the maintenance of it, and all of that and more has been solved with this machine, and it boasts some insane stats like dual nozzle printing, a heated build chamber, a huge build volume. You can do 5 different materials and or colors at the same time. This is also the laser module, so you can engrave with it. And there's also a cutting tool that can cut vinyl and all sorts of other things. We're gonna get into as much as possible, but first I just wanna prototype some of the ideas that I have for this track because I think we can do really cool stuff with this. This is the slicer software from Bambu called Bambu Studio, and while it's very robust, I found it surprisingly intuitive. I started by testing out my basic hook design, which has some threads on the inside as well as a hook on the end. I wasn't sure how the threads were going to print or how the hook was going to be strong enough in different print orientations, so I tried out a few different options, and the nice thing about Bambu Studio is it will automatically generate support material that you can inspect. And there were a couple options that obviously just weren't going to work. It was too much support material. So I chose 2 that looked the best, and then I can print them for real to see if the threads work. I wanted to see how these printed on the recommended settings from Bambu, and both these hooks came out impressively well. The supports came off without any problem. The one on the left is darn near perfect. The one on the right has some issues related to print orientation, so I'm gonna go with a 45-degree angled print moving forward. The other thing that I need to test is threads, because all of these parts are gonna thread together. And I wondered what would happen if I printed a bolt. Would it be strong enough? Would there be enough fidelity in the print to actually get it to thread together? I didn't know, but it was pretty easy to find out. The part did thread into the hook, but there's one design problem that I'm gonna need to solve. So the brilliance of this T-track is that it works with these T-shaped bolts that have kind of an oval-shaped head on them, and this inserts into that, and you can tighten them down, and the bolt's not gonna spin. Imagine if that was a regular bolt head, you're trying to tighten it, it would want to spin inside of this track. Now I've made a circular hole with a circular cutter head, and the channel is now the same exact width as this cutter head. So the largest thing that I can insert into this hole is a circle that's the exact same size as the track, meaning that I can't do anything oval shaped with it as it is. So my idea is to drill a bigger hole than the one that the cutter head makes and try and insert an oval shaped piece that I've 3D printed into that hole. I want it to be as concealed as possible, but I want to make sure that it's flat enough on these parts that it won't actually spin. So I've just gone up one drill bit size. We're going to test that out, see if it works. If that works, great. If not, I got to go larger and larger until it does. Ooh. That didn't go well. Good thing this is still the test mantle because the drill bit tore out the grain. I was able to fix it well enough with a bit of CA glue and try out my printed T-bolt. It was a bit of a struggle to get it to move back and forth, mostly because of the CA glue, but partly because I didn't have enough tolerances in my 3D print. So I sanded down both the track and the print until I got them running smoothly. I rebuilt my model so it was a little bit thinner, and I also designed a couple of bolt versions of it too. This is real speed, so this is how quickly this machine moves. It's so impressively fast. Also, if you're wondering why all my prints are blue at the moment, it's because I only have one spool of filament. There's more on order that are coming, and I'm really excited about that because I can try out some stronger filament as well as some multi-material printing. Once I had the nuts and bolts built, I also did version 2 of the hook. The main difference being that I extended the amount of threads. There just weren't enough threads in the original version. So I made this slightly deeper. I made it at the 45-degree angle. It printed beautifully. And then the deeper threads gave me a chance to use a tap to clean up those threads. While they worked, they were a little tight, and I don't mind it being slightly tight and then cutting the threads so that they're perfect. I tested out a bolt, it threaded in beautifully, and now it's time to test it on the track. A moment of truth. Let's see how this thing works. Slides pretty good. Let's see how it tightens. Tightens good too. It's not moving, and it's really easy to untighten. That's awesome. That's the foundation. That's exactly what I need to build off of, and now I can build all sorts of different hooks and things to hold lights and wreaths and all sorts of other things. I'm gonna work on those designs, but I'm still waiting on some stronger filament. So in the meantime, I can take this into the house, check the proportions, and then I can start building it for real. Okay, well, I'm not completely convinced on the rounded over corner. I might just have to test that out on the slab and see how I like it. One thing I am gonna have to change is I made it too shallow now. It needs to be a little deeper. I've got decorations hanging off. I will absolutely have to scribe this to the wall. But I think the test mantle has taken me as far as I can go. Now it's time to finally cut into the slab. Oh no. This is a massive problem. Yeah. I don't know that I can get it out of this. I barely had enough length on this to begin with, so I don't really know how I can get it out of this slab. All right, I have the other slab. I'll look at the other slab. I think it's bad news for this slab too. Ugh. I can see stress fractures all over this thing. No. I don't remember seeing this at the lumberyard, and it's really cracked all along here. I wonder if it's because I stored it upright on the concrete. Maybe it sucked the moisture out of it. Could also just be the wood. I've never worked with this wood before. Madrone wood, workability. Madrone is easy to work with machine tools, hand tools, blah, blah, blah. The wood can be difficult to dry. It has a tendency to warp or twist or crack. Yeah, it's cracking, all right. I don't trust this slab, even though let's see, 72. Yeah, I could probably get it out of this slab. But if I do that, it's probably gonna crack after I install it because more is gonna be exposed. I kind of think maybe the best thing to do is let it do its thing, embrace whatever is gonna happen to this and use it for a different project. But then, what do I use? I do have the Claro. This is not what I was planning to use it for. Whoa, it's heavy. Oh my God, it's beautiful. That'd make a pretty nice mantle. This is called Claro walnut, otherwise known as California black walnut. It is native to Washington, but more associated with Oregon and California. It doesn't have quite as good of a story as the Madrona, but it is absolutely gorgeous, and it's not cracked. The only problem is that this piece was slated for Ashley's dresser, which I'm planning on building very soon. And so I need to get her approval before I cut into it. No, it's not a bad thing. Well, it is a bad thing that other slab can't be used. But I've laid out, this would be our mantle. So where you see that line here to here. I explained to Ashley what the issue was and why the Madrona just wasn't usable and how this Claro was kind of the perfect shape for a mantle and even better live edge. It's got this nice S curve on the front, and ultimately she was into it.
Looks great.
Sweet.
Yeah, I like this piece right here. This is really pretty.
Well, I got the Ashley seal of approval. I actually think she might have liked this more than the Madrona, so we're in good shape there. Now it's time to cut into this slab and see if I can deliver on my promise of a beautiful mantle out of Claro. They cut half the thickness first. Between a slab that's over 2 inches thick and a blade that's probably pretty dull, I wasn't able to cut it at full depth. It was smoking like crazy, and it's a pretty dense wood as well. I ended up cutting it about halfway and then adjusting it and cutting it again and again until I got all the way through. To keep as much of this slab intact as possible for future projects, I did a cross cut, leaving myself about 3 inches of extra room, and then I followed that up with my Sweezan pull saw to cut out that little bit that the saw blade can't get to. On the exposed end of the board, there are some cracks, and this is the reason why I gave myself about 3 extra inches, because it's really hard to see how deep these cracks go until you start cutting into them. My method is just keep cutting until you see them disappear. Urban Hardwoods had obviously removed most of the bark from this tree during the drying process, and that makes sense because it can trap bugs, it can trap moisture, and cause rot. There was still a little bit on there though, so I scraped that off with my Sweezan Japanese chisel and followed that up with a card scraper to clean it up completely. One of my favorite things about this board is this angled piece. So the way that the tree was growing, the way that this was milled, it gave this really nice bevel in the front, and I thought it would be cool to copy that bevel on the side so it wraps all the way around. My theory is that this will look like the live edge without having to replicate the live edge in an unnatural way. I still have a couple inches to spare on the board, so I'm gonna try the rounded over corner again, see if I can get it to look a little bit better than it did on the test mantle, and try and blend it into the live edge as much as possible. I ended up really liking the look of the rounded corner now that it sort of integrated into that bevel. The other side doesn't look nearly as good, and I confirmed that the decorations will fit. It's so cool to see this coming together, and honestly, I'm starting to come around to thinking this was the better slab to begin with. I did have one note on the roundover. I didn't think it was big enough, and I also needed to cut the board down to length. So I cut off that end and reshaped the corner on both sides. I've never really worked with Claro before, and I want to see what the finish looks like on this before I actually put it onto the mantle so I don't mess it up. I sanded down the scrap end that I cut off, and it's a perfect test bed for the finish I'm going to be using. And this finish is brand new to me. This is by Carbon Method. It's a ceramic nano finish. I saw a demo of it being used at Texas Woodworking where I met Dan, the owner of the company, and it looked awesome. So I had to give it a go. It's supposed to be super strong, but also look like natural wood. It's not supposed to build up really thick like a film finish. And if you watch my previous video doing the shop renovation and I restored my table saw in that video, I used Carbon Method products for it. That came out amazing, so if it can work for metal, I'm curious what it can do on wood. I quickly applied one coat and buffed it off, and I gotta say, for the first coat, it looks really impressive. Even the end grain was sealed up really well, and it showed off a lot of the figure in the wood, which is what I'm hoping for. I'm really excited to see what it looks like on the final mantle, but there's a lot to do before I can test that out. With the corners shaped, the next step is to get it fitted to the fireplace. And this is easier said than done. It's gonna be a little bit complicated. One thing that I did was I made a center mark on both the wall and the mantle so I can know that the overhang is exactly the same on both sides. And once I've got it fitted, the next step is to scribe it to the wall. Walls are never flat, and the best thing to do is to use a scribe so that you can cut those contours into the piece that you're trying to fit up against it. With the contours of the wall marked on the back side of the mantle, I can now cut those lines. And again, I hate jigsaws because the blade always deflects and you end up with an unsquare cut. I like to do my scribe lines, if possible, with a track saw. Fortunately, these curves were pretty gradual, so I was able to just move the track saw track over and over again and create an arc by making multiple cuts. In the spots that I couldn't reach with the track saw, I used a pull saw and a rasp. Then I could bring it back into the house to check to see how I did. That's a good fit. That's a lot better and definitely worth the effort. So it looks good on top now, but it does not look very good from down below. And I need to figure out a way to get this to match up with those arced bricks. There's a huge gap on both sides. So I decided I might as well just pocket the whole thing out. This isn't something I've ever really done before, but because the masonry is so unique and handmade, I have to copy it perfectly. I used a tool called a kiradashi, and it's a Japanese single-bladed knife, and it's really good at getting right up against surfaces. So I traced around the fireplace facade and brought it back to my shop, and in better light, I traced it out again using the same knife just to make it a little bit deeper. The next step was to actually start pocketing this thing out, and for that I'm using a router. I started in the center with a test cut, and I realized that it was hard to cut with it in front of me, so I flipped over to the other side of the board and found that it was much easier to cut with the hose running away from me. After that, I worked my way from one end of the board all the way over to the other side. I established a line really close to my scribe line, but not quite on it, and then it was just a matter of nibbling out the rest of the material. With the bulk of the material removed, it was time to clean up that edge, and so I used my Japanese chisels. I could lock them into that scribe line and easily establish a precise line along the entire length. Sitting pretty good on this corner. I think I can refine it a little bit, but this side is getting caught on the round over as well as the back edge, so I'm gonna have to refine it a bit. But that's pretty good for the first test. This is the part of woodworking that takes a lot of patience. You don't want to overshoot your line. You don't want it to be too tight. If I force this mantle down over the facade, it could potentially chip it out. So I just worked with a couple hand tools on the floor and slowly nibbled away at it. After about 3 or 4 tries, I was finally able to get it to pocket in. All that patience paid off. It fit beautifully. Now there's just one more obstacle in our way, which is to cut the track. But first, the filament has arrived. Bamboo has a lot of options on their website for filament, including ones that are flexible, ones that are high strength, as well as ones that are designed for high heat. And speaking of higher heat, this is a fireplace. So I found this PET-CF, which is carbon fiber reinforced PETG, designed to be dimensionally stable even in high heat applications. Now I don't see leaving these hooks up when the fire is on all the time, so I also tried some PLA that's carbon fiber reinforced to see what that does, and of course I got them in Christmas colors. The AMS2 automatically loads and registers all of the filaments, and the bamboo spools come with RFID tags already in them, so the machine can recognize what filament it is and automatically adjust the temperature settings so you get the best results possible. And this is important because these are tricky filaments to print. They need a specific nozzle temperature, as well as a bed temperature, as well as the temperature of the chamber. And I gotta say, it's pretty impressive that my first print came out this clean. Those threads feel so much better than the PLA. PLA was pretty good. This little hook is designed for hanging Christmas lights, and as a first test, it came out incredibly good. So I printed 9 more. The next thing to test out were the nuts and bolts, and while they looked amazing, functionally, they were not good. So carbon fiber is a tricky little devil. They want to snap if they're super thin, but it is more rigid, and the high heat is great, but it's not essential for the bolts because the bolts will sort of be insulated by any part that they're in. So I changed course with the bolts and printed them out of some PLA Tough, and these came out awesome, and it's great that they have a little bit of flexibility in them, so they take a lot of force for them to snap. Now my troubles weren't over there because I struggled to get the stocking hooks to print well in this PET CF. Fortunately, the H2D has sensors, so it can sense when a print fails. There's also an onboard camera, so you can see exactly why it failed, and in this case, the support material gave up right here. But that wasn't the end of my problems, because in this orientation, this material was super brittle. Which got me thinking, why were the light hooks so strong and this one so brittle? My guess is that comes down to print orientation. There are surprising similarities between woodworking and 3D printing, especially when it comes to construction. If you think about 2 spoons, one where the grain is going across the handle and one where the grain is going with the handle. The one with the cross grain is going to snap across that handle super easily. The one with the grain going along the handle is going to flex, and filament functions the same way. So what I think I'm going to do to fix my problem is reorient the grain of the filament. To do that, I split the model in two and laid it flat on the build plate. This meant that the print head followed the shape of the hook as it was printing. This time the prints could not have come out more perfect, and they got a lot more strength because not only is the grain aligned, but it's also an extra inner layer on the base where it was printed on the build plate. That gets reinforced again with some CA glue as I connect the two parts together, and now this thing is bomb-proof. Once I had that figured out, I set it up to print a whole bunch more and got back to work on the mantle. I still need to cut the track, and the problem that I had with the test mantle is that it slid around on me. In other words, the work holding wasn't very good. When Carbon Method sent out the finish, they also sent out these. They call them bench nuts, and they asked me to give them a go. The closest thing that I can compare them to is the material that the track saw grip is made out of. It's designed to grip as well as function as a standoff, so you don't need clamps when you're doing routing operations. And I was really impressed with how it held, especially on melamine. I also needed to support my track saw track during this operation, so I cut a piece of 1/2-inch plywood and double stick tape that down to fill in the gap and make the mantle a little bit wider so that all that grippy tape underneath would have something to hold on to. And because I tore out the grain with that brad point bit on the test mantle, I picked up a new Forstner bit, 7/16 of an inch. This should give me a much cleaner hole. The holes came out clean, and now it's time to route the track. It's essentially a rinse and a repeat of last time, except for this time I've got a lot better work holding and a lot more support on the track saw track, but it's still unnerving because I can't lift it up throughout the entire cut. I have to go all the way through and then check to see how I did. Oh, so good. Awesome. What a relief. With that out of the way, I could now clean it up and start sanding to prep for finish. I removed all the double stick tape, I sanded it up to 320 grit, and started to see the quilting and the marbling in the grain, and I cannot wait to see what that looks like with finish on it. Once I got the board cleaned up, I could start the process of applying the Carbon Method ceramic nano finish to all the surfaces. This finish is designed to be incredibly hard wearing, and it's great for things like dining room tables and bar tops, while at the same time, it's a very thin looking finish. It doesn't look like you've built up a big thick layer on the surface of it. I've been wanting to try this finish for a while, mostly because I'm on a quest to find stronger finishes that look a lot more natural, and I think this might be a really good option. It dries really fast, and you can apply coats within an hour, and there's kind of a process to applying the finish. But basically, I started with the hard coat first. I put 3 coats on of that, waited 24 hours, and then I applied the top coat, put 3 coats on of that, and then I can add the ceramic care. And ceramic care is kind of what it says on the bottle. It takes care of the finish, and something that you can apply in the house just to restore the finish, depending on how much it gets used. After 3 sessions of applying finish, it looked incredible. I mean, it is gorgeous, and it brought out all the chatoyancy and all the colors, and I couldn't be happier. The mantle is now dry and ready to be installed, but first, I had an idea to hide a little note inside the fireplace. I'm not going to be happy if anyone removes this mantle in the future, but if they do, they'll learn a little bit about the history of the house. I shimmed the front and vacuumed all the dust off the top, and I'm going to be gluing the mantle down. Now, I wouldn't say that this is my first choice. I would love to have some hidden hardware in there, something that bolts into the wall, but given the way that this pockets over the top, it really wasn't an option, and this is basically how they glue down kitchen countertops, so it's going to be plenty strong enough. The mantle nestled down really well, and the adhesive started to grab right away. I did have to do a little bit of leveling just to make sure that the adhesive wasn't pushing it up in certain areas. I added a couple paper-covered bricks to the back to hold it down while it dried, and used a level to put pressure in areas that it was slightly off. I got the mantle level, and now I can head back to the shop and work on some more prints while that dries. In fact, the entire time I was working on the finish, I was also doing a bunch of prints and experimenting a bunch. The first thing that I did was print off a number of these PET CF hooks, but then I started getting a little bit weirder. I think it was the Christmas spirit that was starting to get to me because I thought it'd be cool to design a candy cane hook for the mantle. And this turned out to be pretty easy. There's a section in the app that allows you to take the spools that you have and decorate with those colors on top of whatever model you upload. So I designed this chunky candy cane, decorated it, and then with the dual nozzle printing, I was able to very quickly print a bunch of candy canes off. And that was just the start. Next, I designed a wreath hanger out of PLA CF in matcha green, and it came out so good. Now let's get even crazier because this is not just a 3D printer, it's got freaking lasers. With the crumb tray, the laser module, and a piece of cork, I can now cut out bumpers for all the hooks that I already made, so I'm not gonna damage the mantle. I love how much this thing just looks like you're looking into the Matrix when it works. It looks so freaking cool. And the results were awesome. Exactly what I wanted. I put a sticky back on the cork, and so I'll be able to just attach these, and they've got nice rounded corners. They look really professional. I added the bumpers to all the parts, and then I could bring it into the house and start installing. The wreath hook uses a couple machine screws and some printed nuts. I leave it pretty loose. I slide the first nut in, slot that over, and then I can put the second nut in and slide the whole thing to the middle. I then tighten down the machine screws and it's locked into place. After that, I can add Christmas light hangers as well as the hooks. I did the black hooks on the left and the candy canes on the right. I strung up the lights, added some decorations, and hung the stockings. Not too shabby. Oh my God, I think it looks amazing. And the cool thing about this is it's a system. So as the seasons change, I can develop more hardware for it. And we've been working behind the scenes to make this, which is a bud vase / plant propagation station. Thank you to my buddy Brett, who's been helping me with the 3D designs. If you have ideas for other hardware, please let me know in the comments down below and we'll make them. I can't thank Bamboo Lab enough for sponsoring this video. I had a blast working with the H2D. It's amazing and I'm pretty addicted to it. These big trees that nest together were made on the machine, as well as this little laser cut house. It's really like having a little factory in your shop. It's absolutely astounding, and the perfection of the prints blew me away. So if you're interested in H2D or any of the Bamboo products, go check out my link in the description down below. That is an affiliate link and it does help the channel, which I appreciate. Thanks for watching, and thanks as always to my Patreon supporters. You guys are the best, and I'll catch you on the next one.